social media, and welcome to another episode of Talent Talks, the podcast where we hear professionals within the talent attraction and recruitment space. And a big warm welcome to Salma Sodawala, Talent Acquisition Manager over at ASOS. Salma, welcome to the podcast. I really hope I did your name justice there because I practiced it about 3 times before.
You did. Thank you, Josh. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you so much for joining me. So today we'll be talking about inclusive hiring, your journey to date. So to kick us off, as we have in all other episodes, how do you get to ASOS? I know that you've got a bit of a storied career. So what was the journey like?
Yeah, so an interesting background. When I was at school, really interested in fashion, went to university because basically everyone else was going to university and I didn't want to be left at home. So took a 2-year course, I thought I'll start with an HND, see if I like it, see if I don't. Luckily, really enjoyed it and did pretty well in it. So managed to switch on and do the last year of a degree. So did a degree in clothing marketing and distribution. Came out and thought, what do I want to do with this? I don't really know because I didn't really know what I was going to university for. So, and everyone was like, be a buyer. And I was like, my sister's a buyer. I don't really want to be a buyer. And she'd actually done a design course. So I was like, well, I can't draw, so I can't go down that route. So actually, the company that I'd worked for since I was, a Saturday girl, and then in university holidays, said to me, why don't you come and work for us for a bit and do some visual merchandising? They were a costume jewellery company. They had concessions in lots of fashion retailers. And so they gave me a car and I drove up and down the country, did 3 shops a day and would go in with my box of tricks and re-merchandise the product they had in store, make it look really nice, and then leave it all to them, go off to the next shop. So I did that on and off for about 10 months. And then I saw this great job in the back of the Guardian newspaper. Looked brilliant. Selling. Have you got sales experience? No, not really, but I reckon I could do it. And it said it was a perfume house. So I was like, I'm gonna go for the interview and see what happens. Got offered the job, joined. Yeah, within 2 weeks realised it was selling fake perfume. So they were reproducing smells, probably out of rat poison, I don't know. And it wasn't going to pay me the 18 grand that I thought it was going to pay me all those years ago. So I met a really nice girl doing the same thing as I was. Her family were way kinder than mine, so her family actually bought the perfume, so she had some sales, and she very kindly split them with me because my family were like, absolutely not.
That was the smell? Did it smell all right?
It was the smell. They knew it was fake. They were just like, this is rubbish. What are you doing? So literally I did it for 2 weeks. He got a job in Adecco, the recruitment agency, and they had a job called in for a garment tech. And she phoned me up and she was like, isn't this what you did at university? And I was like, kind of. And she was like, well, we've got no one to put forward for this job. Do you want to go for it? So I was like, yeah, great. So I went and worked at SDS, which was at the time the world's largest independent testing house. So worked there, ran a program for Marks and Spencer's when they were delisting some of their big suppliers, and then we would go in and do independent audits. So a retailer could contact us and say, we've had some stock arrive, we need somebody independent to go in and view it. So we would do that anywhere in the country. We could be like in a barn in the middle of Widnes through to like in a big distribution centre in one of the big industrial parks. And we used a team of freelancers that were really experienced, and I would go out with one of them and they would sort of show me the ropes because my boss handed in a notice 4 days after I started. And my big boss was like, you'll be fine, we'll use the freelancers, they'll teach you. I was like, okay. Yeah, and then they taught me, and I learned that you can get bribed in this job quite easily. So we had a supplier whose product had been failed offshore. They'd shipped it anyway. It had been failed in the UK. It had then been returned offshore. They then brought it back again, and then we were called in. And he said to me, I don't understand why you won't take money in a brown envelope on a Friday afternoon like all the buyers do. So I was like, oh, wow. I was in my early to mid-20s at this point and was a bit like, oh, I don't think this is right. Drove back to the office, asked if I could speak to my boss. He was like, bear with me. He went straight downstairs to speak to the MD. 10 minutes later, I'm in the MD's office. Never met her before, really. Never really spoken to her. She was like, right, you and I are going on a journey this afternoon. We're going to meet the retailer. So I had to go in and meet the sort of MD, buying director, merch director at the retailer and explain what had happened. A little bit scary, but I was just, this kind of, and they were like, okay, thank you very much for alerting us, that kind of thing. And then that sort of project was coming to an end, and I just thought, what's next for me? So moved into supply side of garment tech and retail side, really enjoyed it. But then I got to the point where I was working for a brand, and there was very much an opinion of, find something wrong with the product, we don't really need it, it's not really selling. And that just didn't sit well with me because I'd worked on the supplier side. I knew that they would have already paid the factory. And then if we then cancel that order, they incur all those costs. And I was like, it just doesn't sit well with me, morally, ethically, everything about it. So I sort of spoken to friends, and I was like, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with my life? And they were like, do something with what you're good at. And I was like, what do you mean? And they were like, talking. So I was like, because everyone, to be fair, does say shut up sometimes. So I applied for a job at a recruitment agency. I saw it advertised. It was actually an agency that I'd used quite a few times. And one of the consultants rang me up and she was like, why have I got your CV for a recruitment job? And I was like, I don't think I want to be a garment tech anymore. What I really wanted to do was go into factory auditing, but everyone said, it's not safe to do as a woman. And back then it probably wasn't that safe, to be fair. So, went for the job, went through a few rounds of interviews, had an interview where one of the directors said to me, the thing I'm not getting from you is that passion for money. And I was like, I thought it was a bit crass to talk about it. And he was like, that's what we need. We need to see you're hungry for money. That's how you're going to make money in recruitment. So I was like, okay, this is an interesting concept. Brought up in a family where, you don't really talk about money that openly, and you don't talk about your money with anyone else for sure. So, that was an interesting learning curve. So, started in recruitment, worked in my first agency for 5.5 years, UK and international. Then I moved to another agency, which was much smaller, and built sort of an area up from, it started when I joined, but we built it up to be sort of the biggest area in the business. I was there 8 years, and then I left there and went to another agency. Again, had a small startup in London. They had a much bigger setup in the north and grew the sort of London office, head office side of the business. And then unfortunately COVID hit, and I took a part-time styling job at home when I was made redundant, and thought, do I want to go to another agency now? I had a couple of agency conversations, but I knew that my heart wasn't really in it, and I actually wanted to go in-house. So saw the job at ASOS, knew somebody on the team, and messaged her and said, do you think they'd consider me for this? And actually she was like, let me pass your CV on. And then the person that contacted me, I'd worked before on the agency client side. And she was like, I need someone to come in for 3 months and just recruit. We've got all these vacancies. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And she said, if nothing else, it will give you 3 months in-house experience on your CV. So I thought, okay, great. And then I was really lucky. I joined. They had a permanent job, and within a month I was made perm. And the rest is history.
Talk about falling into recruitment.
Exactly.
Everyone you speak to kind of says, I never expect to get into recruitment. That was never my bag. But you really, really did fall into recruitment.
You don't grow up and think, I want to be a recruitment consultant. Absolutely not. You just end up in it.
But look, and that mantra's changed. That kind of hunger for money. Obviously, we all need to afford to live, but those motivations to stay within recruitment have changed, haven't they, over the years? So can you talk us through that?
Definitely.
What shifted to?
Yeah, I think, when I was younger, it was all about how much money can you make. I'm never someone that's been, and this is probably a bit strange for someone that worked on agency side for sort of 15 plus years. I was never that competitive. So I'd have colleagues that'd be like, oh, look, I'm going to smash it. I'm going to be the top biller for the month. And I'd be a bit like, I don't really care about being the top biller. I just want to know that I have billed really good money. I've hit my targets. I've hit my own personal targets, and I've made the company money. And I know that I'm going to get a good paycheck at the end of the month. That's sort of, my competition was almost myself rather than anyone else. Whereas, there'd be people in the office, I billed 3K more than me. I'm going to get that other placement. I'd just be like, oh no, that makes me feel a little bit cringy. So I guess when I'd been in agency for so long, I just thought I could go to another agency, but actually, what am I going to learn? Yes, I could learn from another MD, but other than that, what am I actually learning that's that different? I was really lucky that my clients, a lot of them moved with me across the agencies I worked for. And I just thought, actually, now it's more about what can I learn? What skills am I missing? And, every time I was sort of approaching people about in-house roles, they were like, oh, you haven't done the direct stakeholder management piece. And I said, well, I've done it, but from a client side. So I'd go in and, maybe present to their directors, and they'd say, yep, great, you can work on these roles, but not that direct, working with them, doing the sort of strategy, looking at their succession planning, their teams, evaluating all of that, working really closely with an HR partner. And I think, I just thought, that's, what am I going to gain if I go to another agency? And actually, the big learning curve was coming into a big corporate. Agencies are much smaller businesses. You kind of have a bit more of a free reign. I'd been lucky in all the agencies I'd worked for where if you bill money, you can kind of set the tone for how you work. If you're delivering, yes, there are obviously constraints around the business, but you're pretty much given, I was lucky, I was given a free rein to get on with my job. And then I came to a big corporate where I'd go, we'll just do this. And then I'd be told, well, you can't do that. And I was like, why? And they were like, red tape. And I was like, ugh, this is another world. I'm not used to this at all. So it took me a little while to get my head around that. But now I have, 3.5 years in, I think it's so rewarding. I think it's very different. The stakeholder relationships you build, that's where you get your buzz. Previously, I think you got your buzz from, I've made a placement, there's all this money coming in. Now the buzz is you're still filling jobs, you're still working, but you're actually working and shaping like a business area. And I think that's what's really key. I'm lucky that I work with quite a lot of what we call our management committee, which is effectively our C-suite. I have direct relationships with quite a lot of them, and we have a trusted partnership. And I think that, for me, is a key driver now, rather than necessarily it being just financial.
How has inclusive hiring become a passion point within that? Could that become a personal thing that
Yeah.
you do?
So I don't know whether it stems from coming from an underrepresented community or just seeing what other people have go through from being from an underrepresented background. But we've got some great partners that we work with, some external partners that have really sort of shown us how you can make sure that you are inclusive in your hiring processes. And I think as part of the talent acquisition team for us, it's key. This stops with us at the end of the day. It kind of starts and stops with us of being inclusive in our hiring processes. So that's looking at the way that we interview, the materials that we put out on our website, looking at our employer brand, and really defining what those processes look like. So we've set up an interview committee internally, which is a group of people that are from underrepresented communities that actually will volunteer to help out and interview with other business areas that don't necessarily have any ethnic diversity within their teams. Or it could be they don't have any gender diversity within their teams, because we do have some business areas that are predominantly female or predominantly male, or I guess if you looked at something like supply chain, there's a lot of males in that area, and if you looked at our product teams, there's a lot of females in that area. So this interview committee, they all go through hiring ASOS training, which is an internal program that's been drawn up by some of the talent acquisition team. They go through our all-in training, which has been written by our DEI team. And they go through that process. They volunteer for themselves. They obviously have to speak to their manager and check they can help. And then they sit in on the interview panels, and they are a trusted voice. They're not just there to make up numbers. They're not there because they've got a different colour skin or they're a different gender. They are there to give an opinion, to ask questions. Often they'll split the interview up. So if they're not from that business area, they might ask the behavioural questions, because ASOS has got 10 sort of behaviours. And so those questions are a bit more generic. Whereas if they are from the business area, they could ask some of the technical questions. But they're there to support, and that is the biggest driver for us. So we report on it monthly. We report back into our talent team on it monthly to check where the improvements are or aren't being made. We have screening questions within our ATS system that asks you, when you're booking an interview, is this a diverse interview panel? And if you answer no, if you answer no or yes, the next question is, will you be using the interview committee? And that data is then taken from there and reported on. So we can go back and say to the talent team, we've got 880 interviews that have happened where people haven't stated if it's a diverse panel, if the interview committee have been used, why not? And that's something that, like as a TA leadership team, we then challenge our teams on and say, why aren't you using them? Why aren't you filling in this information? And it has to be integral to every part of your interview process. So every single role that we interview for must have diversity in that panel at least at one stage. And that needs to be some ethnicity, and it also needs to be gender diversity. So we'd always say, no, you can't interview with 3 women. Sorry, but no. And it's making them understand why and how that feels from an external candidate perspective as well. And we just actually had a candidate that started with us, and they gave some really, really good feedback on, they sort of said, well, why are you doing this? And the interviewer explained, and they went, oh, I've never heard of that before. It's great. And they said they had such a great experience from the diversity of thought. The hiring manager said it was really interesting doing an interview with somebody not from my business area. They made me think differently. We bounced off each other. We gave, we had different feedback markers that made it a really balanced interview. And then the person from the interview committee said they had an amazing experience and they would love to do it again. So for us, it's a kind of bit of a win-win, but it's just making the stakeholders understand why and the importance of it, and that it's not going to delay the process. I think they all think, well, here they come, talent, blockers. They're going to slow us down. They're going to slow down our recruitment process. We're not here to do that. We are here to just make you understand what your team looks like now, because half the time you're seeing that team day in, day out. You don't realize there's no gender diversity in your team. You don't realize there's no ethnic diversity in your team because it's just your team. It's opening their eyes to it, pointing out the data that we can pull from our own dashboards, saying this is your gender representation, this is how many leavers you've had. And actually they've been from a specific gender or a specific ethnicity. And what are we going to do to combat that? And making sure they understand when they're given a shortlist, it will be a balanced shortlist. If it's coming from our TA team, we've looked at, we're not going to give you a shortlist that's only men. We're not going to give you a shortlist that's only women, and we're not going to give you a shortlist that's only one ethnicity. You know, we want to make sure that you understand the importance of it and the whole business understands it. Because at the end of the day, we're a FTSE company. We publicly publish our Fashion with Integrity strategy. And so we have markers that we have to adhere to.
And it sounds like from the discussions we've had and from the way you talked about it, it sounds like a lot of this is driven. The employee brand is driven by the consumer brand of ASOS itself. It's not something that the talent team have come together and kind of designed separately to that. It's one collaborative effort.
It is one collaborative effort. And we probably redesigned our EVP about 3 or so years ago, and it is something that we're saying we probably need to relook at now, remodernise, look at our career site again, because when we did it, we were really proud of it, and we still are, but actually things have moved on now. Social channels have moved on a lot more, so what do we need to do now? And it's working, you know, our employee brand team will work with our comms and engagement team to make sure that everything is married together and looks like one brand. Because the worst thing you want is a career site that looks like something over here and then your brand looks like something and they don't link, because people will never understand and it will feel like a disengaged business. So it's really key for us that the whole thing links together, and we support people that are approaching us and wanting to come to our business, and that's even part of the sort of diverse hiring process as well. Is our website accessible? What reasonable adjustments do you need if you're coming to us for an interview, whether that's on Teams or whether that's face to face? We need to be considerate of all of that, and looking at neurodiversity as well and how we can make our business much more inclusive than it is now. Because, you know, I'm sure we're not the only ones. There is a lot more that we could be doing, and there is steps are being made, but we're not there yet.
So the ASOS strategic intent is be whoever you want to be. And that is something that's ingrained into your processes and how you approach it.
It is. It's all about be whoever you want to be and bring your best self to work. So, you know, you can do that, but you can't do it if the tools aren't there to support you. So if you're neurodiverse and you come into our building, I would imagine it's incredibly overwhelming. If it's a busy day, there will be product in reception. Then you go through, if you look to the right, you've got a coffee shop. So there's noise around that. There's music usually first thing in the morning. There's also a tech bar there. So if your laptop's broken, you just go straight up over there. If you would go left, that area is called the hive because it is a hive of activity. There's people having meetings all over the place. If you've got to navigate that and get to get to your desk in the morning, that could be incredibly stressful. So we're looking at how we work as a business to make ourselves much more inclusive. So we've worked with a charity in Northern Ireland. They've accredited our Northern Ireland office over there for being a great place to work if you are neurodiverse. So we're now going to work with them. There's a project team of us to make sure that we can get this through all of our offices, and that needs to be global. So our main head office is London. We've got a customer care centre in Leeds, which is just outside of Watford, and then we've got warehousing Atlanta, Berlin. So how can we look at the spaces that are owned by our business and make those more inclusive? So whether that's looking at blueprints for the office that get sent to people before they join, and that's not someone disclosing whether they're neurodiverse or not. Actually, should that go to everyone so that you can work out if there's a best way for you to get to the space that you need to be in? You know, we will then throw something in the middle of one day you'll come in and actually the coffee shop's still the coffee shop, but all the chairs and tables have been moved and there's a catwalk in the middle of the office. If you know your way through that office and suddenly that's in your way, that could throw out your whole day, and you might not even make it to your desk that day. You might turn around and walk back out the front door and go home. And that's actually an awful place to be. You know, we shouldn't have that happening. And we're looking at, is there a separate entrance that we could use so you don't have to walk through that main section when you come in the morning? You know, there are other doors. Do we look at more accessibility there? Even down to things like we've got taps that are, you know, very fancy that you press a button for the hot and cold water. Well, most people can't work them. And if that to you is something confusing and your brain doesn't necessarily understand how that functionality, that you might be thirsty all day. in all seriousness, and that's a horrendous place to be. It's making sure we've got then safe spaces. So we've got a prayer room already in all of our buildings. We have a contemplation room, but it's making how can we take that further? Where can we put safe spaces? And this is a busy office, and we don't own all the floors in it anymore. But where can we put safe spaces? And in those safe spaces, can they be quiet spaces? People can bring their own noise cancelling headphones. They can bring fidget toys, because we looked at putting those in place, but actually what you'll find is people won't use necessarily a fidget toy that somebody else has been using, and they won't want to use headphones that somebody else is using. So then it's looking at the business in a wider context of how do we support those people that need those, that have those additional needs, to make sure that they are safe and comfortable in the workplace, so they can do their job to the best of their ability.
Well, ASOS have the golden of fashion with integrity, and it feels like that's really coming across as the way that you're the way that you're approaching such a diverse range of people that will walk through that door. And as you said, it's incredibly stimulating. You've got all those different things going on going into the office. So how you manage that and how you approach that from the attraction piece, how when you're engaging with people within the process to when they are an employee and when they are walking through the door on a daily basis. And that's all part of the approach. And talent is having a key impact there. It's not just how we bring people through the door, it's how we look after them once they're through the door.
Exactly. And it's even getting them through the door. If someone thinks that this building is huge, and they might not be comfortable coming in for an interview. We need to make sure when they're coming in for an interview that they have the most comfortable experience they can have. And they're almost pre-warned. It's a busy building. These things are going on. And we always say to candidates, please tell us if there's any reasonable adjustments that you need. And it might be we had someone recently come to an assessment centre, and I don't think they'd ever done one before, and they didn't realise the impact it would have on them. And they actually asked to leave after sort of half an hour. And we had to just make sure that person was escorted. We checked if they were okay before they sort of left, and sort of said to them, if you're still interested in the role, that's fine. We can set up a one-to-one interview. But they hadn't highlighted to us that they would find, they'd sort of said, we'd told them the format and everything before. They, I think, hadn't realised how impactful it was going to be on them. Our biggest thing was, are you actually okay? Can we make sure that you get home safe? Can you notify someone that you have got home? And then let's see what we can do to make sure that person still has the opportunity to interview for the role, but in a way that suits them.
Just talk. For anyone listening that works within talent attraction and recruitment, and sorry, we haven't practiced this one, so this might be
okay.
But how have you managed to connect the dots between the talent team and the business? Because you often hear disconnects between especially the marketing, brand and comms team versus talent attraction, and bringing those together. It sounds very unified over at ASOS. How have you managed it?
I think we're quite lucky in that respect, in that our marketing teams are really open, and our comms and engagements team work really closely with them. And then the person that we have looking after employee and brand works really closely with comms and engagement, and will speak to marketing all the time. So they kind of have that piece almost between them. They work out the best way to navigate that. And then we have that fed back to us, because employer brand sits within talent acquisition. We then have that direct feedback of this is going to work, that's going to work, or we say we want to do this, and our employer brand person will say, well, you can't do that because marketing won't have signed that off for X, Y, Z reason. Then we have to say, right, okay, so what would they sign off? How do we navigate around it? It's even when we first started doing sort of video content on LinkedIn, we didn't realise that we couldn't use sort of regular music or pop music, because legal were like, you can't use that, we don't have a license fee or a license agreement. And we were like, oh, oops, someone take that video down really quickly, because they've just presumed like a TikTok or something like that. We can just take the music and put it on there. And we were like, oops, we didn't realise, and so we have to be really careful about what we do, and making sure that anything that we do publish out, if we need to, it will be run past comms first, marketing to check they're okay with it. If it's just sort of normal talent content, then, and then individuals put that on their own feed, that's normally okay. But anything that goes off, out from the ASOS.com page that our employer brand person looks after, they will have already known, they know what their own parameters are. And if they're slightly unsure, they will have spoken to comms and marketing first.
It sounds like you have really healthy relationships. So it's really interesting to hear how you're working together. And where do you see inclusive hiring and inclusive attraction best practices moving in the next 3 to 4 years? What does that look like for you?
For us, it should just be ingrained in our business. It shouldn't even be something we're talking about in a year and a half. The same way that I guess we started talking about DEI a a year, 18 months ago, we shouldn't be talking about that anymore now. It all should just be, that's part of the process, that's natural. What are we doing actually? What's the next thing? By then, we should have already done all of this inclusive hiring. We should have looked at all our offices and made sure that they're all now certified with an autism charity or autism awareness charity to make sure that they, someone who's neurodiverse would feel as comfortable as someone who's neurotypical. It will be on to the next thing. I don't know what that looks like yet, but, AI is here now. So how can AI help us with that and get us where we need to be?
Your incredibly storied career journey to where you are today, would you have done it? Would you do it all again with hindsight?
Yes, but I would probably have moved in-house a little bit sooner than I did. I think you can look back at everything, and everything you learn from everything, and every different role I've had has taught me something different. So had I not gone and worked as a garment tech first, I wouldn't have had the commercial understanding of a retail head office. So therefore, when I went on to recruit in my first recruitment job, that was I focused on retail clients and suppliers. Well, because I'd worked in both, it gives you an advantage because you understand how the business works and how it all fits together. Whereas, I've had colleagues past and present that have never worked in a retail head office before, or they've never worked in the fashion industry before. And so you've got to learn that along with the job, which I personally think would be a lot harder.
I think you're absolutely right. You go through that journey and you learn something on journey. Oh God, repeats myself.
Learn as much as you can, take from the people that you're working with. So whether they be your peers, your colleagues, your managers, literally sit, watch, learn, observe, be around people as much as you can. I think you've got potential to have a skills gap if you don't have that opportunity. We all learn by watching, seeing, doing, sitting in on meetings, that kind of thing. If you don't have the opportunity to do that, you could really miss out on some really valuable information. I think just be your authentic self. Don't try and change for anyone, but at the same time, everyone's got parameters with what they do within their work. But just make sure in what you do, you show up in the right way, and you sort of navigate skills gaps that you or people in your team have, and look at it together. You don't have to be right in everything you do. You don't have to know the answer to everything, and that's okay. And I think that's a big part of, I guess, what you go through your career is realizing that you don't have all the answers, and we all have to learn. And the minute you stop learning, then that for me is a bigger issue.
I was once told if you've got nowhere to grow or go, that's the time to move on.
Exactly that. And if you can't go, and also I think it's focusing on, you don't always just have to go up. Your career doesn't have to be linear. It can be squiggly. Mine has been very squiggly, and that's okay. But what I've learned is I've learned something in every one of those roles.
Well, look, Salma, I think that's a fantastic way to finish up and wrap up. So thank you so much for your time. It's genuinely fascinating to hear all the impact you're having at ASOS and how the ASOS is taking inclusive practices so seriously and kind of everything that you guys are putting into place. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, and really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your time.
Not a problem. Well, to anyone listening, as always, please like, subscribe, share. Thank you if you're tuning in. Salma, once again, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. And we'll speak soon on the next episode of Talent Talks. Thank you.